Okay, it's 3 o'clock and I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone to our Committee of the Whole meeting for March 18th, 2019. Ask members of council if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest with any of the agenda items. Say none. Presentations, announcements, we have none. We have an agenda confirmation, but I'm going to suggest that we make a couple of changes to it, if it's okay with council, to make things move a little bit more naturally. I'm going to suggest that we have one delegation, and I'm going to suggest, and the delegation is related to the tennis club, and so I'm going to suggest that we do the delegation and then move to item 710. Move item 710 directly under 7.2 so that we can move things along a little bit more quickly, and that the delegation is right beside when we talk about that item. Is everybody okay with that, Council? Councilor Kittredge?
I have a question about the agenda, since it's a committee of the whole. I was wondering where the items that were previously on the tracking list of the previous council that weren't resolved are where are they, like, in terms of, because I haven't seen them since last term, and I know that there were some items on there that we were supposed to do.
New term of council will start a new tracking list.
Okay, so how do we get items on that tracking list?
Do you want me to explain?
Yeah, go ahead.
The purpose of the tracking list was to track actions of council or where they directed staff to do something in particular. Although the tracking list evolved into things where council would put items on that was not the general intent. The intent was to track items that were brought before council and were either deferred, referred, or needed further information. So with the new term of council, we have developed a new tracking sheet. We're a little behind in our minutes, to be perfectly honest with you, which is why there is no tracking sheet on this agenda. I'm still doing minutes back from February the 6th. So until we get that up to date, there is no tracking sheet on here.
Can I just ask a question? When can we expect to sort of see something on the tracking list, like in this committee of the whole format?
Well, if council wishes to continue with that tracking sheet, we actually were going to just keep that sheet internally moving forward with the new council. But if it is council's desire to see that tracking sheet on an agenda, we could certainly have it ready by the next council agenda.
Thank you.
So is that a motion?
Yes, I would like to see.
Okay, so a motion to have a tracking sheet for committee of the whole. Seconder for that motion, Councilor McCrae. Any other discussion on that? Oh, Councilor McLean. If there's a direction, this is new council, if there's direction from council to include the items that were on the previous council's tracking list, then that would be a motion that we could do right after this motion. But it is a new council, so it has to come from this council. So let's deal with that. We want a tracking sheet first, and then we'll go on to a potential second motion. So do we want to have a tracking sheet added to committee of the whole? All in favor? And that carries. And did you want to do another motion to resuscitate the old tracking sheet into the new one?
I'm not going to use those words.
You don't like resuscitate?
Carrie, given the new councillors haven't seen it, should we circulate it first?
Sure, I believe there's only a few items left on it. How about I send an email around with those items, and then at the next meeting we can either add them or exclude them. How about we do it that way? Would that make sense? Okay.
Okay, do we need a motion for that?
No.
Okay, we're good. That's direction? Okay, good. Okay, with that business taken care of, ask for a confirmation of the agenda, that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington confirm the agenda as amended for its meeting held March 18th, 2019. Move for that recommendation. Councillor McElwain, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And that's carried. We have confirmation of a few sets of minutes here. Committee of the Whole, January the 24th, 2019. Public meeting under the Planning Act on February 11th. And Committee of the Whole, February 19th. Recommendation of the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held January 24th, February 11th, and February 19th, 2019 be adopted as circulated. Move for that recommendation. Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, we do have one delegation. And I'd ask, so the delegation first though, and then, or do you want to do the?
Why don't you just do items 1, 2, bring the delegation, and then do item 3. Like 7.1, 7.2, bring the delegation, 7.3.
Okay. So we are going to move then to 7.1, that temporary extension of liquor license for the Grand River Raceway.
Paul Walker is here.
And we have a report there, and we have Mr. Paul Walker here to answer any questions if you have any. But it's a temporary extension to a liquor license for the Grand River Raceway for Industry Day. Any questions from councillor, or do we have anybody to present, or just questions? Pardon? Yeah, Industry Day and the truck and tractor pull. Do you have the report in front of you? Any questions from members of council? We have, no? Okay. Mover for that recommendation. Councillor Dunsmore, second by Councillor Foster. All in favor? And that is carried. Paul, you can stay for the whole rest of the council meeting, or you can leave now. We won't. Okay, then we'll move on to 7.2, the draft accessible taxi cab, limousine and vehicle for hire bylaw. And we have a report from Carrie. We also have our county representative here, and to answer any questions as well. And I will turn it over to Carrie.
I don't have anything to add. If they have questions for Kelly, it's really Kelly's report.
Yeah, so it's really Kelly's report that we have to bring through. Any questions from this, from Kelly? Okay, we'll move the recommendation. It's a pretty long one. That the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorizes the mayor and clerk to execute a reciprocal licensing arrangement and delegation agreement relating to the licensing of accessible taxi cab, limousines and vehicles for hire between the Corporation of the County of Wellington, the Police Services Board for the County of Wellington, the Corporation of the Township of Center Wellington, the Township of Mapleton, the Township of Guelph-Mossa, the Corporation of the Town of Minto, the Corporation of the Township of Puslinch, the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North, and the Corporation of the Town of Erin. Move for that recommendation. Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Kittredge. All in favor? And that's carried. Thanks, Kellyanne. Again, you can stay for the rest of the time, see how we do things at the township here. Okay. And then moving on to 7.710. Okay, thanks for the help. 710, we have Fergus Tennis Club, a use of grounds agreement. Report from Pat Newson, Managing Director of Community Services. You've also received some emails from our delegation, which will be coming later, but we'll do the report first. Pat.
All right, so this is an agreement that has been in place for 10 years previous to share management and work on the tennis courts, both as the tower tennis courts as well as the ones located at the Sportsplex. So the recommended agreement is attached, and as summarized in the report, there were 2 small changes from the previous agreement. One was to charge the club an annual $250 hydro expense. In the original agreement, it had talked about the club being charged for the hydro expenses to the courts. Unfortunately, there's no separate meter to those courts, so we couldn't track that. So there was no payment actually received. So going forward, we've just agreed upon an annual flat rate to cover for the lights expense. Also, we've adjusted the maintenance of shared expenses from 50/50 to 75/25 to match what's happening at the Tower Street courts. There was another small change, which was for Wednesday nights. The hours in the agreement, which are on Schedule C, indicate that the members' hours and the pay-as-you-play hours. The pay-as-you-play hours are really very much dictated by when we have our counter open at the Sportsplex and are able to take payment. The change is that instead of having members only begin at 8 p.m. on Wednesday, that it begins at 7 p.m. So back in 2017, Township staff and the tennis group met and made that change. So that has actually been in practice for the past 2 years. And we used the opportunity of the renewing the agreement to reflect that change in Schedule C. So we're asking for council to take a look at the agreement and approve it. But since then, we have received some correspondence from a delegation who would like us to reconsider some of the pieces in this agreement. And staff only received that comment back on Friday afternoon late. So we had a meeting first thing this morning to discuss the agreement and some of the recommended changes and how we could respond to the concerns. And I guess we would like some more time to have a chance to bring additional information back to council on that. So what we had thought was a relatively simple rollover of an agreement. Items have been brought forward, so we would like an opportunity to go back, have a conversation with the Fergus Tennis Club, because they are really who this agreement is with, allow them to respond to us with some of the concerns, and bring that back to council.
Thanks, Pat. So you'd prefer us to defer this?
I think so. We'd like to bring this back at the April Committee of the Whole meeting, which would also provide us a chance to bring this agreement to the CSAC committee, which meets on April 10th. It's our inaugural meeting, and we can bring this to that group to provide their comments back to council as well.
Okay. I guess so we need a motion from Councillor if we wanted to defer it. A motion from Councillor Van Leeuwen.
Why don't we hear from the delegation so we get their input?
Use your. Okay. Yeah, well, yeah, no, that makes sense. We also have a member of the Fergus Tennis Club here as well. So, so at this point, I'd like to call on Silvana to present a delegation. Welcome, Savannah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. Council
Just hit your
staff.
mic there.
Oh, just the button right there.
Right here.
Push it. To the light.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. I have been a member of the Fergus Tennis Club for several years and also served as a member of the board. I am concerned about the delivery of programs, equitable court access, and ensuing conflicts on the courts. The agreement between the Township of Centre Wellington and the Fergus Tennis Club fails to address these issues. Section E of the agreement states, the club acknowledges that the Sportsplex courts are available for use by non-club members on a first-come, first-served basis, and requests use of the Sportsplex courts on that basis. This contradicts Schedule C in the same agreement, which allows the club to infringe on public hours at the Sportsplex on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. for 10 years. Section 3 of the agreement states, the club shall only carry on its activities on the permitted lands during the days and hours specified in Schedule C. The club may request a change to these hours and/or days for special events by submitting a written request to the Township's Managing Director of Parks and Recreation at least 4 weeks prior to the event. A special event typically represents a one-day or weekend occurrence, not an entire season. However, history has clearly shown, as does the agreement, that the club has booked every Wednesday evening during public access hours at the Sportsplex for the entire season. In addition, they have pre-booked other evenings, days, and weekends during prime times at all 5 courts for the entire season. This infringes on both the general public's rights of use and those of the members not involved in the pre-booked activities. Furthermore, it goes against the agreement of booking 4 weeks in advance. The fact that notices are being put up either the week of, the day of, during the event or not at all, confirm the lack of proper notice and the 4-week notice clause in the agreement is not being adhered to. Why are these events being approved if they are not meeting the 4-week notice period outlined in the agreement? Once approved, whose responsibility is it to put up these notices, the club or the township? The hours for this seasonal sport are already limited. Access is further limited on weekends at the Sportsplex courts when the front desk is open on Saturdays and Sundays between 11:30 and 3:30, the hottest hours of the day to play. Up until a few years ago, when addressing my concerns, the township was kind to arrange for free Sundays through the In Motion program. However, the program has since been disbanded, thus reducing public access further. The Tower Street courts are pre-booked by the club and dominated by doubles events. This does not encourage singles or family play. These members are then forced to go to the Sportsplex, where the club has also pre-booked both courts for several programs over the course of the entire season. The use demands then become greater because both club members and members of the general public are competing for space. This has resulted in conflict. Allowing the Sportsplex courts to be booked by the club for all season programs, even when the Sportsplex front desk is closed, interferes with access by other members to use these additional courts. Effectively, the club is using all 5 courts for the entire season, hence making it difficult for both their members and the general public to access the only courts in Centre Wellington. This results in people going to either Orangeville or Guelph to play or not playing at all, which comes with its own ramifications. Schedule C of the agreement states that all club members and members of the general public must sign in prior to court use at the Sportsplex. It has been evidenced this is not the case. Furthermore, if members are on the Sportsplex courts, nothing precludes the general public from accessing the courts without paying because the gate will already have been unlocked. Therefore, in this case, pay-as-you-go is based on an honor system. The sign-in sheets at the front desk are not an accurate reflection of court usage. The Parks, Recreation and Culture Plan outlines the current ratio of courts to Centre Wellington's population of 31,300 to be 1 to 6,226, with a recommended future service level of 1 to 5,000. At the recommended ratio, Centre Wellington has far exceeded the current tennis court allocation by 6,300, the equivalent of another court. Population growth, the resurgence of tennis, and a growing interest in pickleball will put further strain and demand on tennis amenities. Although the plan does include a recommendation to build 3 additional courts by 2028, the current situation must be addressed. The findings of this plan outline that the top barriers to participating in parks and recreational activities are 55% due to lack of desired facilities or programs, 51% due to lack of personal time or too busy, and 44% find programs are not offered at convenient times. Based on this feedback, the recommendation in this plan is to form a strategy to encourage activity in an unstructured drop-in setting. Although the club refers to their activities as drop-in, the fact remains that all the courts are pre-booked for doubles and other programs. Therefore, the current monopolization of the courts prevents the true drop-in initiative from occurring. In the past, when the club allowed for greater access to the Tower Street courts and they did not utilize the courts at the Sportsplex for their club programs, it provided a more equitable opportunity for individual and family play, not just doubles, which excludes this type of play. While the club pre-books their activities for the entire season, individuals are not permitted to book courts at either the Tower Street or Sportsplex locations. This makes it difficult to plan, especially if you live out of town. Active community participation wanes once players realize court access is very limited. Restricted access is not conducive to promoting an equitable playing standard, nor does it provide an inclusive environment as previously outlined in the former agreement. I am concerned that giving the club carte blanche will set a precedent impeding rather than fostering best practices in ensuring there is a balance of opportunities for all age groups as outlined in the Parks, Recreation and Culture Plan. I feel that in order to find solutions, decisions should not be made in isolation. Therefore, discussions should be encouraged between all club stakeholders, including club members, the club board, and Parks and Recreation Township, to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. I believe part of the solution would be that all club members adhere to the club policy, as was done in the past and worked successfully. This has not been reinforced in recent years. The club policy states prime-time hours are weekday evenings from 6 to 10 p.m. Reservations at Tower Street courts can be made between 2 hours and 72 hours in advance. Members may book up to 1 hour for singles or 2 hours for doubles, except during prime time, where bookings of only half an hour for singles and 1 hour for doubles will be allowed. Members may not monopolize any specific reservation time each day. If there are a lot of players waiting to get on the courts and you've been on the court for 30 minutes, finish off your set and let someone else play. The following solutions are offered based on all 5 courts in Centre Wellington being booked during prime time every day of the week and weekends. Leave at least 1 court open during prime time for members to play. Do not book all-season programs at the Sportsplex. This would allow for overflow of members to play during member hours and play hours for the general public. Commit to a cutoff registration deadline for clinics and other programs to avoid courts remaining empty when not enough people show up to play in pre-booked slots. This would allow others to play. Reflect this accordingly on club website and via email. Gather input from club members prior to the beginning of the season. Perform a follow-up assessment, engaging the members once the season has begun. Offer doubles programs later at night to allow families to play earlier. Encourage singles and family play, not just doubles. Utilize more off-peak hours for programs. Ensure players sign in with time noted. Revisit the color coding system determining levels, which currently prohibits partners of different levels to play against one another during pre-programmed events. Reintroduce shoe tags to clearly identify members. Review the agreement between the Fergus Tennis Club and the Township of Centre Wellington every 1 to 2 years. I believe that a mutually beneficial agreement could be reached with open discussion and compromise involving all pertinent parties. Thank you.
Thanks, Savannah. Any questions from council? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Kelly. A question for Silvana. Silvana, you mentioned conflict at the courts. You also mentioned, I think, having difficulty getting a court. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Have you personally had conflict at the courts?
Yes, I
over
have
court
on
time? And
2
also, can you
occasions.
speak to me about times where you've had difficulty getting a court? Thank you.
Yes, on 2 separate occasions, we've had my family, my husband and myself and my children, we have been approached during a time where no notices were placed at the Sportsplex courts, and we were asked to leave the courts, and not in a kind manner, and I felt threatened, and we did leave. On another occasion, we had already booked at the Tower Street courts when they had booking on the board, and one of the board members double booked after and essentially took over the court. So we don't want any conflict, so we just left. And we came to learn that through the programs, so we live out of town, so we have to drive in to play. So it isn't terribly convenient. And when things are booked online and people don't show up, or these clinics are booked and they don't show up, the courts are sitting there empty. So at times we've taken a chance to drive in and say, okay, if they're not free, we'll run errands. And they have been empty. So we could have planned, let's say, our family time on the weekend to play, but that precluded us from playing because they're all pre-booked, but you don't know if people are going to show up. So they're pre-booked, but they serve as a drop-in, they stated. So I'm not sure if I've answered your questions, but.
Councillor McCray?
Thank you, Mayor Linton. I'd like the idea of going back, staff, to discuss this with the tennis club, but I'd like to know who is representing the general public, because their needs need to be considered as well, and I'm wondering if maybe Ms. Sangliano would be willing to represent them during that discussion.
Pat, if you could just respond to that. You talked a little bit about having the Community Services Committee, so CSAC being part of that, so I think that would probably cover off individuals, but if you can speak to that, it'd be great.
So the agreement is with the Fergus Tennis Club and the Township. The Fergus Tennis Club is made up of a number of members, and their board is who we have been negotiating with on the renewal, and that is an elected board by their membership. So we're confident that they're speaking for their members when they negotiate with us. As far as the public, I think, as was stated by the mayor, we are going to take this agreement, the concerns, the feedback we get from the Fergus Tennis Club, and we can also invite both parties as a delegation to CSAC and then allow them to provide a recommendation as to how they see the department proceeding and make a recommendation to council. So I think that captures the non-members of the tennis courts and the general public.
Councilor Dunsmore?
I'd like to make a motion that we table this and send it back to the CSAC committee for further review and discussion, and then bring it back to council to be voted on later.
Any other discussion? All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, so moving back to 7.3. And we have our drinking water quality management system endorsement and report. Karen, welcome, Karen.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Karen McMillan. I'm the Environmental Support Coordinator, and one of my key roles is the Quality Management System. So the purpose of the report before you was to provide a basic understanding of the Quality Management System and its communication, and to ask for council to provide an endorsement as per element 3. So I always like to start with the QMS example and a car manufacturer. A quality management system is to ensure every part, every car is manufactured the same way every single time, every single day. It does not look at future products. It does not care what's happening in the boardroom. It is keeping the manufacturing in check on a daily basis. So the QMS will adapt to the future over time, and that's called continuous improvement. So the quality management system for the township's drinking water system has been in effect since 2009. The ministry accepted the QMS as written in 2011 and 2016 and provided the township with its municipal drinking water license. And that will be coming for renewal again in 2020. The main cycle of a quality management system is plan, do, check, and improve. So I brought the binder. So the quality management system is a binder for us. It's kind of, this is how we do things. It has the processes in, it has all the information. You can find it on the intranet site in an electronic format. This sits on my shelf. That binder we call the operational plan, and it describes how we fulfill the 21 required elements in the quality management system. What I included in the report were the key points which are really important to council. The production of drinking water every single day is the do part of the cycle. Just like the car manufacturer, we want to provide a consistent product daily. The check part of the cycle is completed several ways. First, as I've already stated, the ministry receives and accepts the plan every 5 years and issues us our municipal drinking water license, and it is dependent on having a quality management system in place. Secondly, as a check, the staff conduct internal audits annually. They ask the questions, are we conforming to the plan? And we are constantly critiquing our own work. Thirdly, a third-party auditor completes an audit annually. They dig a little bit deeper into the entire plan. And finally, the QMS leadership team meets monthly, and we're looking at the overall effectiveness of the various parts of the plan, and we're also looking at best practices. Based on these checks, you move to the final part of the cycle, which is continuous improvement. Based on non-conformances, opportunity for improvement, you adjust what you're doing as continual improvement, and then the cycle begins again. You plan, you may make changes, you do, you check, and it's just a continuous cycle. That binder is a live document that is changing all the time. The QMS endorsement is important. And what does signing the endorsement mean? It means there's 4 things. This is my little pocket guide for the quality management system. It means you understand that a quality management system is in place. That is the binder. It means that you are receiving communication from staff regarding the quality management system. That occurs at management review. Ian will be attending our first one next week. And following that, you will all receive copies of the reports that go out. It's important to read those and look at them. It also means that you will thoughtfully review the requests made by staff to ensure the quality management system remains in place and continually improves, because the quality management system is what we require to have our drinking water license. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Karen. Any questions from council? Councilor McCray?
Thank you, Karen, for that report. I guess one thing I'm curious about, when you talk about the infrastructure and the quality standard, does that also include when decisions are being made to, say, for example, bring a dormant well back online? Should we have any concerns about that?
Every 3 years, we do a risk assessment. And the risk assessment is we're looking at all factors at all well sites, the source water itself. So all those things are considered in a risk assessment. And if they're going to impact the quality of water, then we have to have contingencies in place, and we have to really look at that. A risk assessment is really important, and that is element 7 and 8. Sorry, I was just thinking of another item to say towards that. The other thing is when we do every 5 years and we have to renew, we send in our operational plan to the ministry and we're renewing our drinking water license, we have to provide them a raw water assessment. And that is where we are talking about every well, the raw water we're seeing, the changes, and then the ministry has the opportunity to come back to us and have us do further work on that. So it is something that if a site was being brought online, we're looking at the raw water assessment, we're communicating that to council, and we're looking at that through a risk assessment as well.
Yeah, follow on, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I'm new to this process. Part of what I'm trying to understand is, for example, during the 2019 budget deliberations, we discussed bringing F2 back online and drilling it deeper. I have some serious concerns about bringing F2 back online. It's not just a matter of water quality concerns, as you've been discussing, but also the potential well interference from that well being in very close proximity to another existing municipal well, F1. I guess the challenge I have is I do not want to sign off on this as long as F2 is part of the equation that we're considering it bringing it back on board. I feel that there needs to be more research done into why F2 needs to be brought back online, because I see it as a serious problem to our existing water system.
I guess a call-in question. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let Colin speak to that.
Okay.
All right, through Mayor Linton. So the quality management system and the water supply master plan, they're two separate processes. We're looking as part of the water supply master plan to expand the capacity of our water supply system, and the quality management system is producing high quality drinking water from our existing wells, and really I think we're kind of confusing two separate processes. We are really looking at, for F2, assessing the feasibility of bringing that back online. Not at its current depth. We're proposing to deepen, to go to a deeper zone within the aquifer. That's the way the current proposal is. But it's from staff's perspective a separate issue, not really related to the quality management, which kind of deals with more of our day-to-day operations of the water supply system. Certainly, there will be opportunity. The water supply master plan's not complete yet. We do have another public open house. We're with the Key Projects open house planned for April 24th. We'll have more information. We're specifically going to present more information on the preliminary recommendation to consider F2. F5 as well, optimization is one of the preliminary recommendations as well. And that information will be presented to council later this spring. So still lots of opportunity, I think, to have conversations as to, you know, whether or not we should proceed with the feasibility studies at F2, F5, and then if we choose to proceed, you know, kind of the first step is to collect some information to help us better understand the conditions of the aquifer at those locations.
Councillor Kittredge.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for Karen. Previously, when we were talking about the master plan, it was indicated that F1, there were some quality issues and the ministry might be involved in that. What is your role when the ministry comes in about a quality issue like well 1?
I guess my role is really looking at the background of the data. At F1, we do general chemistry every 2 years, and F1 is one that I had highlighted through that raw water assessment that needs to go to the ministry, that we were seeing changes in certain parameters over time. What we did was started to sample more, and we're looking at the trends that are occurring to see whether it's simply the water or is it how we're operationally running that well, pulling water from different depths. So I guess my role is looking at the data. I feel like I'm always in the background looking at a lot of information and trying to put up the red flag when I see issues within the water system.
Councillor Kittredge, just following.
Because we were told that the ministry would be involved maybe in that well in the future. So what is the impact for us as a municipality when the ministry becomes involved in a well like that?
Through Mayor Linton, so I'm not, like, the ministry does do annual inspections of our water supply system, and we submit annual reports to the ministry that has both raw water quality data, treated water quality data, our pumping data as well. All that's submitted to the ministry. So there's almost a constant supervision by the ministry on the water supply system. And of course, if anything, you know, there's a duty for us to report if there's, you know, a threshold exceeded, whether it's pumping volumes or from a water quality perspective. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the ministry's coming, because they're always kind of overseeing our operations of the water supply system.
So was there anything different, the minister's involvement in that well in particular, any different than any well?
Yeah, so just conferring with Dino, yeah, there's nothing that the ministry would be particularly focusing on. We did have Kyle Davison, a risk management official, talking about the establishment of the issues contributing area, which is more focused on kind of salt, so sodium and chloride impacts at the well. So, but that's through the source protection plan under the Clean Water Act. It's a bit of a separate process, but yeah, there's nothing, like I said, the ministry's kind of constantly monitoring through the Safe Drinking Water Act and those related reporting requirements.
Councilor McWayne?
Thanks, Kelly. I don't have the in-depth knowledge of Ian or Linda, so I'm just need a clarification as it relates to, I guess, tying together the water supply master plan and the quality management system. The quality management system, I think you said, does a risk assessment every 3 years. And so is that, I guess, how does that tie into the possibility of drilling or re-drilling well F2? Are we going to get 3 years down a track that costs us a whole bunch of money before the risk management comes in and says, no, you can't do that? You know, it's a clarification in that area if you could.
For sure. Yeah, through Mayor Linton. So yeah, we need to collect some data first, right, of the aquifer system at that location. So I think that would be the first step, would be to assess, like, this is F2 now is a very shallow well. It's what we call a goody well. So it's under the direct influence of a surface water source. So, you know, with that in mind, we're looking at, through the optimization, looking at drilling a much deeper well into the municipal aquifer, one that's has those protections, or those confining layers above it that prevent, you know, the shallower water from, you know, kind of reaching at depth. So, you know, we've got what Karen was mentioning. We do a risk assessment, which again is looking at our threats to the existing wells, whether it's, you know, like from a spill or from a disaster of some sort or a significant water main break. We have a number of threats that where a risk assessment has been completed. Where those risks exceed a certain threshold, we establish procedures to address those risks. So the optimization of F2 and F5 kind of falls outside of that process. Again, we would take a very kind of measured and incremental approach to assessing those locations. And again, like I said, the first step is feasibility, right? So is it feasible to bring these locations online if they're at a deeper depth? Like, is the water quality you know, sufficient enough that, or good enough that we can actually bring these online? So there'll be kind of checks and balances as we go along the way. There'll be short-term pumping tests, just again to assess the potential interference and how F1 and F2 would kind of operate together. So it'll be a slightly different process than through the quality management system. We'll be looking at, again, the feasibility of bringing these two sites and assessing the aquifer.
So just to clarify, there won't be any work that's done on F2 until after the water supply master plan has been approved by council.
That's correct.
Councilor McCrae?
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. So just for clarification, in terms of our signing off on this endorsement, that is with the understanding that it does not include the future plans for F2? It is as the current system is now, without F2 operational?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilor McCrae?
If I may ask another question, related to element 20, you refer in there about includes 16 mandatory topics that must be covered. What are those 16 topics? Oh, well,
Okay, so I'll run through them all so that you know. You're going to become very familiar with these as the reports go. I do want to say in management review, you have to meet at least annually. We've chosen to meet quarterly, and we speak to the items in that list that are pertinent at that time, making sure that we cover all 16 within 1 year. So, incidents of regulatory noncompliance, incidents of adverse drinking water tests, deviations from critical control points and response actions, the effectiveness of the risk assessment process, internal and third-party audit results, results of emergency response testing, operational performance, raw water supply and drinking water quality trends, follow up on action items from previous management reviews, the status of management action items identified between reviews, changes that could affect the quality management system, consumer feedback, the resources needed to maintain the quality management system, the results of the infrastructure review, operational plan, currency, content, and updates, and staff suggestions.
Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for Karen. Karen, you mentioned red flags. One of your roles is to raise the red flag if ever we had an incident. We're being asked to endorse this document, so I wondered, Karen, can you talk me through what would happen if we had an incident where perhaps E. coli contamination or trifluoroethane contamination? How would that work if there was an incident in terms of making council aware, and how would you raise that red flag? Can you talk me through how that might work if we ever had an incident?
If we receive any adverse results from the laboratory gives us an immediate notification of that. We then need to respond to that. And part of our communication procedure is to make sure that top management, including council, are aware of something going on within the system. We also run through emergency scenarios. We have a procedure that is actually for notification out to the public. If it was an E. coli, how would we roll out that notification efficiently to ensure that people were aware of what was going on in the water system? So between our emergency management that we do and our testing and the communication that is required, that should all roll out efficiently. Will it be perfect? Probably not. But I think we have the items in place. One of the big things when Walkerton occurred was the communication was not there. The procedures were not in place to follow through in an event like that. And that's why those 21 elements, I'm a huge fan of the quality management system. They've put in all the items that a council can never say they didn't know stuff was going on. You can't have untrained staff anymore. The communication has to be there and you have to be prepared. That's why they do the element 18 and elements 7 and 8. You're looking at your risk. You have to be ready. You have to have procedures in place and be prepared for them.
Thanks very much, Karen. Very important piece of documentation. Whenever we have to sign our name to something, you know that they were going to ask all kinds of questions. I have the recommendation here that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington receive as information the Quality Management System Annual Report as outlined in Report Number IS 2019-08 dated March 18th, 2019, and that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington provide the endorsement of the Quality Management System Operational Plan. Move for that recommendation. Councillor McCrae, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, Karen. Thanks, Colin. Moving on to 7.4. Woolwich Township Boundary Road Agreement. And you have a report from Adam. Adam, you're going to speak to this? Okay. Welcome, Adam.
Been out of practice. I don't get in here that often. I was going to start by asking, that map I provided, Lisa, could we put that up? So what we're looking at here is, let me start by saying what I'm presenting this morning, or this afternoon rather, is the boundary road agreement between the Township of Woolwich and Center Wellington specifically. But we do in fact have boundary roads with other municipalities around the perimeter of our township. So I asked to have this map put up for reference. It's not a pretty map. It's one I've decorated up by hand. But you can see that on the left-hand side of this page are the west side of the township that illustrated in both green and yellow is the boundary roads between the township of Woolwich and ourselves. And the color coordinated, or the colors, differentiating colors rather, the yellow portions are the segments that Center Wellington has been maintaining, and the green portion is the portion that the township of Woolwich has been maintaining. So that gives you a bit of a kind of a look at that perimeter border of the township, and you can also note that that road is not a through road. It doesn't travel all the way north-south, that it is broken north of Middlebrook Road, and is primarily south of the Grand River, the neighboring portion of the roadway. So with that in mind, what I'm asking of Mayor and Council is to authorize for head of council and our clerk to enter into an agreement with the Township of Woolwich. And although this is being presented to you and for the first time, and the fact that we haven't had a written agreement to date, we've been operating reciprocal in the fashion that we care for these roads since I don't know when. It is undocumented. The fact that Township of Center Wellington has been caring for the yellow portion of the road, and Woolwich has been caring for the green portion of the road for a number of years. By registering this agreement, this will make it an official written documented agreement. We've had legal professionals from the Township of Center Wellington, and the Woolwich staff have also presented this agreement to their legal professionals just for advisement, and it has to do with specific care for the roads of Weisenberg Road, what's called Middlebrook Place, which is just a segment of the north end of Middlebrook Road, Noah Road, which isn't properly depicted on that map up there, and Side Road 5, which is the yellow portion at the north end of the map. And so with that, this agreement will outline what our responsibilities are for operational needs, and it also, in the event that we have a large capital project, how the project will be apportioned between the two municipalities. Tomorrow at Woolwich Township staff, they're also presenting this very same report. Well, their report was written by their internal staff, but the associated agreement is also going to their council with anticipation that we can all enter into this agreement in the same month perhaps. And this agreement will be in effect for 10 years initially, and then will be extended an additional 5 years after that, and has the potential to be roll over indefinitely unless there's issue where either the Township of Woolwich or the Township of Center Wellington would like to have the agreement rewritten for whatever reason. So this agreement I personally have gone through in great lengths and detail. I've gone through it with staff to ensure that, you know, with the operational issues, that it is in fact what we are doing as far as our care for the roads, and I've also taken a hard look at the cost sharing components when it comes to large capital projects as well. And spent a great deal of time communicating with Woolwich staff as well. So, any questions?
Thank you very much for the report. And so firstly, on the operational side, we're just formalizing what we're already doing on the operational side primarily?
That's correct.
Okay. And there's no major hiccups or no major areas of disagreement between the two staffs?
That's correct,
Okay.
Marilyn.
Question from council? Council Foster?
Thank you, Mayor. Adam, I was looking at the map there, the two sections, the green and the yellow. They're approximately the same quantity of road or distance in kilometers? There's one more than the other?
Yeah, it's very, very close. I don't have the exact meterage of the roadways, but we both felt that it was very fair
Close
in that
enough to
sense.
50/50?
That's right. That
How,
they're-
my question really, Adam, is if ever capital work was required, what are the terms of any capital work? Is it 50/50 cost shared?
Yes, that's correct. And with the capital work specifically, if it happened to be capital work in the portion that we maintain, that we would take the lead on that project. We would steer that project, and we would develop an agreement with them, and we would be the leaders. And likewise on the other side, if it's a section of roadway that they currently maintain, they'll be the leader in that project and come to us with the terms of that project, and it won't take off until we agree with the scope of that.
But in either
work.
case, Adam, it would be cost shared 50/50?
50/50 in either
Thank you.
case.
Council Kitchus?
So is this agreement, at the present time on Weisenberg, we service that road to the south of the,
Yes, that's correct.
so
The-
is that going to change now with this agreement?
No, it's the same. So we currently plow, maintain, do the ditching and whatnot on that yellow portion. So that's south of Wellington Road 21.
Okay.
And then north of Wellington Road 21 is the portion that Woolwich snow plows, and they'll continue to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Council McLean?
Thanks, Kelly. So the bridges are the capital projects that are coming up, and one of the bridges, Woolwich has already decided they're going to close it, I guess. The other one to Middlebrook Place is being repaired. Is that correct? Is the one right on over the Grand River, has that already been determined and it's going to close?
So you're correct in that they've initiated an environmental assessment. It is not completed yet. So they initiated this past year an environmental assessment on two structures that are on the portion that is theirs to be maintained, and they're stick handling that project at the moment. They put out a notice of commencement this past year. They've had that public meeting and put out some preferred options. Preferred options have not been finalized yet with them. It's still, that whole process is at a standstill on their side right now. It won't go any further until they present it to their council, and when they get to that stage, that item will be coming in front of this council as well. With the preferred option will be with those two structures on that roadway.
So, may I?
Councilor McLean?
So the preferred option that they showed at the public meeting and seems to have been discussed since is closing down the one bridge. Do we have any input in that?
So we will have an opportunity to discuss this at council when when we've got to that stage of the process. Currently, staff has written a letter in support of that option from Infrastructure Services to staff at the Township of Woolwich. And the preferred option that to be clear, is the one structure that exists out there currently is to have it dismantled and removed, and to have turnaround areas put in that location permanently. So it's not a done deal yet, but that remains to be the preferred option at this time.
Councillor McLean?
Thank you, Kelly. So we'll come back to us. So the next one then is the one at the other end, which is ours to maintain or to lead the way. And it's been moved up a couple of years now in the 10-year plan, but it's still a long ways out. But I didn't realize actually that there were two structures down there. It's not just...
Yeah, if I could ask.
The one that's closed is which one of those two? Is it?
Through you, Mayor Linton, if I could ask council to refer to Schedule A of the documents within, or the draft agreement, that's part of the report. We can see the Woolwich maintained portion, and there's two structures indicated with the red dots towards the red Grand River, and then what Kirk is referring to then too is the south end of that same roadway. There's two structures. One is referred to as 5P, is currently closed. So there's two. They have two, and we have two on that boundary road. So the two at the north end on the Woolwich maintained portion, the one that's to be recommended for dismantlement and full closure is the one that spans the Grand River, and the one just north of that, a few hundred meters north, it's very close to that location, is recommended for some repairs.
So the 5P, which, as I say, it's been moved up a little bit in the 10-year plan now, but it's still out 5 years from now or something of that nature. And we had a delegation coming to ask to move it up further. Does Woolwich have any? Have they been pushing for any sooner, or given that they're paying 50% of it, or are they on board with our current strategy there?
I would say that they're not pushing to go any sooner than what we have in our current capital forecast. They're going through quite a number of bridge-related budgetary items or issues themselves right now, but that's to say that it would be a co-funded 50-50 project, and we both have to, at the time of that particular year's budget is passed, we'll have to ensure that we're both prepared to pull the trigger on that project, in that we have the appropriate allocated budget at that time.
Ms. McLean? McLean?
So the budget that shows in our 10-year plan for this is only half of that is really in our budget, and the other half is Woolwich budget, or the bridge is going to cost twice as much as it shows, which is quite high to begin with.
Yeah, through Mayor Linton. So yeah, what's shown is again like an all-in cost for replacement, but it is the 50% township share. So we're looking at, yeah, that would be a 50% township share. It's located in 2024 currently.
So the total cost of that bridge is twice that? I mean, it's
so that's an all-in. So that's not just a construction cost. So that's it's an environmentally sensitive wetland area. So that's environmental assessment, that's design approvals, that's construction, contract admin. And that's based on, we mentioned this to council, how if it's further out in the forecast, we have kind of high level assumptions built into the cost estimates. We haven't got into the details. So we've basically looked at the span and applied a per square meter kind of unit rate cost to develop the estimates. As bridges get closer to construction, as they go through an EA process, we start to understand better what structure is going to replace there, and then we get into a lot more detailed of a cost estimate based on what's actually going to be built.
Remember, we're talking about an agreement here too. So let's stay focused on an agreement, the 50% sharing. Councillor Kittrus?
Just kind of a follow-up of what Councillor McElwain was inquiring about, just about these bridges. I realize that this is an agreement that we're doing about the sharing of it. But when they talked about the bridge that they're dismantling, and Colin, you said that we agreed with, I don't know, one proposal there, but that wasn't presented to this council at all. So I'm just wondering why that was. Like, it was a public meeting. I think Councillor McRae and McElwain and myself, we went to this public presentation by the Woolwich Township, and I'm just wondering why that wasn't presented to all of us, like, because that sort of is just like, instead you're making a decision, but really it's a decision that this council should be making.
I did hear that it's coming to council. There will be a recommendation coming to council, and we'll see it when it's our time to see it. Want to add to that, Colin?
Yeah, so it's what I would call like a preliminary preferred alternative, that where Woolwich was looking for community input, broad community input. So based on that, staff have provided comments, and we'd be happy to share those with council. But yeah, before the EA is still a work in progress. As they get closer, I know they want to do a touch point with their council. They've got a couple other truss bridges that are kind of in the same process right now. As it gets further along and we kind of get a better understanding, we'll bring back the kind of more final preferred alternative for discussion at this council table.
Will we see all of those then? All the options that they gave?
So it will be like their Class EA document. Absolutely, we'll have all the options presented and evaluated, and how they came up with their preferred alternative. That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a boundary road agreement with the Corporation of the Township of Woolwich. Mover for that recommendation, Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favor? And that's carried. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Colin. 7.5, demolition control, 284 Aqua Street, or Aqua Street. Randy.
Thank you very much, Mayor Linton. Good afternoon, Council. Before you today is a demolition control application for 284 Aqua Street, former township of Nichol. The dwelling that is being requested to be removed is an existing one-story, 1,019 square foot single detached dwelling with an attached carport. And they want to remove the entire house, including the foundation. Their intention, the owners of the property, is to demolish the house because it no longer meets their needs. But they do very much like the lot, so they'd like to build a new house immediately upon that lot. And further to that, the one-story house was built in 1963. And it is not recorded in the Township of Center Wellington Municipal Heritage Register and it's not designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Randy. Any questions from council? Councillor Dunsmore?
So Randy, just so you can educate me a little bit, when somebody wants to demolish a house like this, do they contact the neighbors or at all, or any of the other people informed about what's going on?
Through you, Mayor Linton. That's a good question, Councillor Dunsmore. There's no legal requirement for them to contact their neighbors to inform them of what they're doing. That being said, it is very neighborly to do so. So what we find in a lot of cases is that they do contact the neighbors. And then, of course, going through the demolition control process, the agendas are on our website. So usually if they're not told directly by the homeowners, they do hear about it, and then they can seek out, either they'll call our office and we'll explain to them what's being proposed, or they can certainly hit the website and read this full report and go from there. But there's no legal requirement that they have to notify their neighbors. It's very much like a building permit. It's neighborly to let people know you're doing an addition or you're renovating your house, but there's no legal requirement under the Building Code Act for you to actually notify anybody.
Thanks, Randy. I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township Center of Wellington approves the issuance of a demolition permit to demolish a single detached dwelling located at 284 Aqua Street, formerly Township of Nichol. Move for that recommendation. Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor Van Leeuwen. All in favor? And that's carried. Sticking with the same theme, demolition control for 198 South River Road, former Township of Nichol. Randy.
Thank you very much, Mayor Linton. So what's before you, members of council, is another demolition control application. It's also in the former Township of Nichol. This one's located at 198 South River Road. And what it is an existing one-story, 1,054 square foot single detached dwelling. The intention is to remove the entire dwelling, including the foundation. This existing dwelling is actually in poor repair, and it no longer meets the owners of the property. It had been a rental, and the owners now wish to remove it. Their intention is to redevelop the property with a new single-family dwelling. This one was built actually in the 60s as well. It was built in 1960. It is not recorded in the Township of Central Wellington Municipal Heritage Register, and it's not designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And I'd be pleased to answer any questions you have on this one as well.
Any questions from council? Okay, I'll read the recommendation. That the Council of the Township of Central Wellington approve the demolition request for the demolition permit to demolish the single detached dwelling located at 198 South River Road, former Township of Nichol. Move for that recommendation, Councillor Kittredge, seconded by Councillor McElwain. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Randy. Move into a partial demolition of a listed property. Mariana.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Linton, to members of council. So the report before you is regarding 63 First Line in Elora. It is a property that's just east of County Road 7, as you can see on the map. This is coming before you slightly differently than the previous two because it is a listed heritage property. So it's listed on the municipal register as a non-designated property with potential cultural heritage value or interest. This has gone before the Heritage Committee at its meeting last week. And it's coming before you because the owner has requested demolition of the outbuilding on the property, which is the barn. It's in poor repair. It's been sitting vacant for about 5 years, so it's structurally not sound anymore. The owner doesn't want to invest any more funds into repairing the building and wants to take it down and construct another storage building in its place in a similar style and with board and batten siding. So the committee reviewed it. The reason the property was listed, I should mention, is for the single detached dwelling on the property. That is a red brick dwelling, but it was not listed for the barn. So council has a decision to make in terms of allowing the demolition. And just as well for the benefit of the newer councillors, if the council does not want the property or the building demolished, the only means of stopping that is through designation under Part 4 of the Heritage Act, so by protecting that building. So I can answer any questions, but the recommendation of staff and the Heritage Committee is to allow the demolition.
Questions from council? Councillor Kitchers?
How old is the barn?
We don't know what the age is. The owner as well does not know. We would say probably late 1800s.
Okay, I'll read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approve the demolition request for the accessory building barn at the listed property municipally known as 63 First Line Elora in the Township of Center Wellington, and that the property municipally known as 63 First Line Elora remain on the Township's Municipal Heritage Registry. Move for that recommendation. Councillor Dunsmore, seconded by Councillor McElwain. All in favor? And that's carried. Thanks, Mariana. Moving on to 7.8, request for development charge grant under our Jobs and Investment Incentive Program for Wellington Perforated Holdings, Inc. And we have Pat here to present this report. We also have the owner of Wellington Perforated here as well to answer any questions if required. Pat, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Linton. In June of 2017, the Economic Development Task Force proposed the Jobs and Investment Incentive to Council as a means of addressing the concerns that the business community had been expressing about the impact of development charges on the ability of local businesses to grow and expand. Council approved the program at that time and provided funding of $150,000. Just to go back a little bit, in 2013 when I started, Wellington Perforated was one of the first businesses that I visited, and Mr. Renton and I had a very good discussion about the impact that development charges had on his business and in its ability to move forward. In 2015, Mr. Renton and his family purchased land from the township to expand their growing business, Wellington Perforated, and proceed with a 34,000 square foot addition to house their metal perforating business. With an investment of $2.9 million and a further investment of potential investment of about $1.6 million. As an initial way of dealing with the development charge issue, he received a 3-year deferral of his development charges and is eligible for a development charge grant under the Jobs and Investment Incentive Program. As the incentive program only covers up to a total of 15,000 square feet, the development charges will be paid on the remaining. He will pay the development charges on the remaining 19,000 square feet of development or of space. The business has also been able to hire additional staff, and with the additional investment that this new building allows, could hire up to an additional 8 staff in addition to the 3 that he hired when he moved into the building. This will be the last incentive under this program, as we hope to be working with the Economic Development Task Force to develop some additional, some different programming to deal with some of the barriers. I do have Mr. Renton here, who can answer any questions that council might have about his project.
Thank you very much, Pat. Questions from members of council? Okay, I will read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington approve a development charge grant in the amount of $69,300 for Wellington Perforated Holdings, Inc., as set out in the Jobs and Investment Incentive Program, and that the Managing Director of Corporate Services be authorized to execute an agreement. I have a mover with that recommendation, Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you very much. Yep. Moving on to 7.9, Community Services Facility Closure Schedule. And you'll see the schedule in front of you for the year. Anything that you want to add to that, Pat?
I think really the only change that we're recommending is this traditionally has been brought to council year after year, and we would like to take the specific dates off and just list the holiday as Good Friday or Christmas Day, and give our sample of what is always done at all of our facilities year after year for our closures. I do want to ask council to approve this for the next 4 years for their term of council. However, knowing that should anything significant change and we want to make an opening that is now closed or vice versa, council still has that authority to make that change, and we would be bringing back a report to that. Our hope here is to expedite the process by doing it one time for the next 4 years.
Thanks, Pat. Any questions from council? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Kelly. Pat, I'm not in favor of closing the Sportsplex on Boxing Day and even potentially Easter Monday. I know we're open on Thanksgiving, and I wonder, is there any ability to have skating, for example, and have hockey playing on Boxing Day in particular? That's a day when the children are off school and looking for things to do. Similarly, Easter Monday. Is there a way we could keep it open at least for part of the time, if not a full day?
Are these statutory holidays?
Right, so the Thanksgiving Monday is the statutory holiday, and the Thanksgiving Sunday is a lot of times what people would consider Thanksgiving, but it's actually the Monday that is a statutory holiday. Boxing Day is a statutory holiday. Correct. Right, so you'll see that on some days we have opened the pool, for example, on Canada Day, civic holiday, because participation in those days have indicated that we should be open. Staff have indicated to me that the cost benefit of opening the other days has not been beneficial, so they have traditionally been closed on those days. During the Christmas break, there are a number of days during the Christmas break that kids are off school where free skates and, you know, public swims are added to our schedule to give the kids a lot of things to do while they're off, just not on Christmas Day and Boxing Day when typically our staff are off and people are spending that time with family.
Councillor Foster.
But Pat, specifically Boxing Day, obviously we don't want to be open on Christmas, but how do we know where, you know, how can we say that we'll not get any use when we've been closed the last several Boxing Days? Like, Boxing Day is a day where children are looking for things to do. To me, we should be open. Recreation is one of our important business lines. Is there a way we could be, at least give it a try for a year?
Well, I mean, yeah, you can respond to that. If there's a motion there, we'll put a motion on the floor and see how it goes. But if you want to respond to it before that happens, I mean, I personally don't like the idea of requiring staff to work on those days. That's what I'm thinking about. But Councilor Kittress?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering, where's the data on what people want and like what days they want to have? Like, I mean, they're paying the taxes and there's some people that just want to do something, and so where's the data that they don't want to use the facilities on these days?
Andy?
So a lot of it is based on requests coming from the community. So we have not had a substantial amount of requests for activities on Boxing Day or some of the other statutory holidays. We have had in the past some events that did take place on certain special holidays. We're finding those are going by the wayside more and more because more people are wanting to spend time with the families. And as well, you know, we've entertained hockey tournaments or things of that nature. If those requests comes in, I think that's what Pat was speaking to, is if we did have those requests, we would do that. To run the entire Sportsplex or the Elora Community Center for a few hours of skating or pool swims is very costly. And the fact of the amount of time that we have to have staff there checking the equipment, doing all the various certain maintenance as well as the security, the cost is not, you know, council wants us to operate these buildings efficiently, and it becomes very cost prohibitive.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I appreciate where Councillor Foster is coming from, but I have to say, Christmas Day and Boxing Day are the only times during the year when we have two back-to-back stat holidays, when families really have that time to be together. And that's the time when I saw was opportune for traveling to other family members, having that one extra day to be able to travel. So personally, I prefer that we stay closed for those 2 days to allow staff an opportunity to be with families or to be traveling to visit families.
That's fine.
We have no data saying that, to prove that no one wants to use it. That's what I'm hearing. And I've had a number of constituents ask me why we're closed so often and when recreation is a holiday matter. I've had a number of constituents ask me, why are we closed on Boxing Day? Why aren't the children skating? And that's something that's a tradition in Canada, to skate or, during that week. I understand we're open on some of the days when the children are off, but recreation is a weekend business. Recreation is something people want to do on some of their holidays. I don't see why we couldn't be open for at least part of the day on Boxing Day, not Christmas, but Boxing Day. Potentially other stats as well.
Councillor McRae.
I'm just wondering if we do have some outdoor rinks, could those not be the fallback position for people wanting to skate on Boxing Day? Is they just go to the outdoor rinks?
Councillor Foster.
It's possible, Ian, but the last several winters, the quality of the ice has never been good until January. It's very unpredictable. Lots of times it's not possible.
Councillor Dunsmore.
If we vote on this schedule, is there anything preventing the CSAC committee from looking at Bob's request? And if we can gather some data, we can get some information and either open it or close it. We can change it afterwards. We're not locked into this, right? We can make an amendment to it.
Well, the only thing that I'd ask Pat about is we have a contract with staff as well, so we'd have to look at our contract with staff because it has to be consistent with that because we passed that already. Pat.
I think both sides of the discussion have been all brought up, and it is a challenge to try to weigh the cost of bringing staff in on a day like Boxing Day, as well as for their own trying to get staff to want to work on Boxing Day, against the number of people who would come to a skate or a swim. So I guess if we wanted to, what we could do at this time is defer this and take this back to CSAC and get conversation there with a recommendation to council. That's one option. In order for us to plan currently, I would suggest that we adopt this up to Easter Monday and come back for the rest of the year. However, the sooner we can get this adopted, then we can start making plans. The evidence that we have that people do not want to come out is our renters. So there's no renters that want to use the facility on Boxing Day, except perhaps for family activities. And at that time, we would consider those, for example, at Belwood Hall. They might use the hall for a family reunion or something like that over the Christmas break. But all of our ice users and renters for those types of programs are not requesting that we be open for their use. So it's strictly be opening for public skating. And in order to do that, you have to open the facility with a certain amount of time prior to the skate, during the skate, and after the skate, and we'd have to staff it up to full capacity to do that. So for the Sportsplex, that's typically 2 facility operators and 2 facility assistants, so that's 4 staff in there. And then we would have to have someone taking payment for that at the counter as well. So you're talking about 5 staff coming in, just because it's such a vast size facility and requires that much attention when it is open. When the ice is in.
Just clarify, 5 staff at double time, because it's a stat holiday.
Yes. Right. Looking to Andy for that clarity. I don't have it all memorized. It's either time and a half for full-time plus another day off, or double time for a part-time. I believe that's how it's written.
Councillor Foster.
First, thank you, Kelly. First point is we're going to pay those people single time whether they work or don't work. So really it's time and a half for anyone who wishes to work. Secondly, I'm not suggesting we force people to work, but I think you'd get volunteers who would work. Thirdly, perhaps we could be open for 5 hours or 6 hours. And fourthly, I personally have been approached by hockey coaches asking me, why is the Sportsplex closed on Boxing Day? I'm also a patron of the weight room, and I've had a number of people ask me why the weight room is closed on statutory holidays. There's no good reason for it. This is what I'm hearing firsthand from users of the weight room. So I think we need to take a look at this, and I'd like to make a motion that we defer this and send it to CZAC for a full discussion.
Can you specify that a little bit more? The discussion on, like, not the whole thing, but on Boxing Day?
I'd like to make a motion that we refer this and defer it and send it to the Community Services Committee and have a good close look at recreation in particular and whether or not we should be open on more stats in general to provide recreation services to our citizens.
Okay, second that. Okay. Any other discussion about that one, Pat?
Point, she had asked that they adopt the schedule to the end of Easter weekend. Could we at least do that?
Yes, I could.
That was what my hand was above.
You could
Thank
add
you,
that as a-
Carrie.
as a
Just
clause,
so that
Carrie.
we can promote, advertise, and let people know that we would be closed up to the end of April for all of the stat holidays, and then relook at the rest of the schedule through CSAC.
Okay, so after Easter.
Yeah, so
Uh,
I've got
so-
adopt the schedule to the end of the Easter weekend and refer the schedule to the Community Services Advisory Committee.
To review being open on more stat holidays. Because I don't want them to be reviewing stuff that we don't want them to.
Particularly, Carrie, about recreation. So not, the matrix deals with the senior center, it deals with
Oh, okay.
other buildings.
Don't worry, we'll read this again when it's done.
Specific to
And
Just to ask if that's the Sportsplex, the Elora Community Center, and the Victoria Senior Center, which is also considered a recreation facility, or specifically the Sportsplex and the Elora Community Center.
I would add the Sportsplex and the Elora Center and the Senior Center, because in my role on the Seniors Committee, I am aware that there's discussion about whether the Senior Center should be closed on stats as well. So we're looking at a broad discussion about recreation services for sport, senior, on stats. Perhaps, for example, Pat, we might not have to open both places, but at least one would be open, so at least some services are provided on stats.
you're asking a lot of a volunteer committee, so just so you know, and there should be, you're a numbers guy, right? So there's going to be significant numbers attached to that, so who's going to be looking at that? Staff? The costing?
Yes.
Okay, so that's got to be part of that, because if you're not only asking the CSAC to take a look at it, but you're going to have to get staff to cost it out.
Okay, let's add that on.
Well, that would be part of what
That'd be part of the discussion, Kelly.
But it's just important that this council recognizes that there's a need for staff to do some homework on this, because we're not only just talking about Easter, one day on Easter, we're talking about, it's pretty wide direction on costing out being open.
The costing will be the same on any stat. A stat is a stat. Employees are paid for their stat when they're not working.
But, okay,
Full-time employee.
right, but think about now it's ECC, Sportsplex, and seniors, and any combination thereof. So think about the numbers that have to go into looking at that. Okay, so I'll read the motion just to make sure you're good with it, Councillor Foster.
Sorry, we skipped the spelling mistakes.
No, I'm gonna say it just the way it's written. That council adopt the community services facility operations schedule to the end of Easter weekend and refer the community services facility operations closure schedule 2019 to 2022 to the Community Services Advisory Committee to review with a focus on opening recreational facility in brackets ECC, Sportsplex, and Senior Center on holidays and during office closures. Is that good? Yep.
I just look at that list and the work involved to looking at, suggest we extend it beyond the end of May or something like that. The Easter weekend is going to happen just after the CSAC meeting. We won't even have council meetings. So I think the reporting time and Pat being able to communicate to our customers, that I think April, having it by, that it includes April and May as approval. Just trying to be rationale that we're not setting false expectations.
Okay, I'll reread it. Okay, the motion is that council adopt the community services facility operation schedule to the end of May and refer the community services facility operations closure schedule 2019 to 2022 to the Community Services Advisory Committee to review with a focus on opening recreational facilities, in brackets ECC, sportsplex, and senior centers on holidays and during office closures. Is that good? Seconded by? Any discussion before we call a vote on this? Councillor Foster?
Let's keep our eye on the ball here. So what I'm asking for is a broad discussion about whether and what recreation services ought to be provided on statutory holidays. The reason I'm asking is I've had a number of people ask me, as their counselor, why are some of our facilities closed on stats. I've had hockey coaches tell me, I'd like an hour of ice time and the place is closed. I've had users of the weight room ask me, why is this place closed? That's what I'm asking for. Let's take a look and see if we ought to be open on some stats at least.
Okay, no, I think we're clear. I think we know where we come from. And anybody else want to add anything to that one? I'm just going to add a little bit. I'm opposed to it. I think we have to do whatever we can to protect staff and and make sure that we're encouraging balance of life. And I think these stat holidays are important for all staff. So I'll be voting against it. Councilor Kitchers?
I guess I'm for this just as a sort of investigating what the demand is, sort of, too. Like, and also just creative options of, like, it might not be staff time. Like, maybe not as much staff time. Maybe there's volunteers. Maybe it's about a level of service, and the rec is like those are days when people have it's off, so it's just a level of service for those days. So that's more why I'm kind of wanting to know more about this, and also because we're saying it's for 4 years, like, so it's like this is the only time we're ever going to be really investigating this option. So that's sort of really why I'm motioning for this, that we really kind of get more feedback from the public about the demands for those facilities, and then also just looking at, well, is there any other options other than paid staff, like, for everything? And that's sort of what I'd like to look at this proposal, like, in a sense, because we are in the process of, we tax people and they have certain demands that they want certain services. So that's sort of why I'm supporting this.
Any other last comments before I call this vote? Councillor Van Leeuwen.
I guess the difficulty is I look at it and say, yeah, we could provide it, but I still struggle with the fact that I don't want to ask others to, remembering that we need to find employees who are going to do something that I wouldn't ask my own employees to do or want to do myself. And I think that looking at, I've never had any complaints on that, but I struggle with this. It's actually not a lot of closed. It's just, these are stat holidays. So I would hate to use up staff time when we're trying to keep it down.
Okay, everybody clear on the motion on the table? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Okay. Moving on to toll booth. Oh yeah. All right, we did 710 already. 7-Eleven, application of a toll booth, Belwood Lions Club, Canadian Diabetes Association. We all love these. Be a little bit better this year without the bridge being out. That was pretty long lineup. Any questions? I think it's self-explanatory. Applications to operate a toll booth in support of the Belwood Lions Club and the Canadian Diabetes Association. Read the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Center Wellington authorizes the mayor and clerk to execute a bylaw authorizing a funding activity in the form of soliciting by a toll booth on Wellington County Road 26 in Belwood on Sunday, May 19th, 2019, from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. by the Belwood and District Lions Club on behalf of the Canadian Diabetes Association. Move that recommendation. Councillor Van Leeuwen, second by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And carries. We have section 8. We have 3 information items. Treasurer Statement 2018, Council and Committee remuneration and expenses from the previous council. We also have a Treasurer's Annual Statement on interest-free loans. And we have minutes from the Heritage Center Wellington dated January 15, 2019. Any comments from council on any of those 3 items? Okay, there's no recommendation from council on this one. It's just for information. Okay, motion to adjourn. Councillor Kittredge, seconded by Councillor Dunsmore. All in favor? And we're adjourned. Have a good rest of the afternoon.